Chapter 26. The League Begins. G'day everyone, Rune here, and this is Chapter 26 of my What If Ash Met Meowth First story. If you're new to this series, click the link in the description below to be taken to the playlist. Now let's begin the next chapter. When 1 PM finally rolls around, Ash is more than ready to face Mandy. He has to force himself to not roll his eyes as the announcer calls Mandy a popular trainer. He'll never understand the popularity race. The moment the announcer calls the matches start, Mandy is running his mouth, attempting to get under his skin. Big mistake for him. For while Ash can have an explosive temper, that is for cases where his morals, family, and the fundamentals of his very sense of self are being attacked. When dealing with annoying bullies, on the other hand, Ash is able to temper his anger into something much more focused. So, as Mandy dramatically calls out his executor, Ash calmly grabs the cameo-coloured Pokeball from his belt and casually tosses it into the air without a word, effectively stealing the wind from the older boy's sails. In a flash of light, Dratini appears on the field with an adorable yawn. Mandy is the first to make a move, calling for Executor to hit the little dragon with Psywave. Completely calm, almost seeming bored, Ash tells Dratini to dodge the attack by going into the water, then follow up with extreme speed. Dratini does just that, jumping into the pool and using extreme speed to swim through it at top speed. Mandy grins, thinking that his plan is going as he wanted. He calls for Executor to use Psychic on the water to create a whirlpool and trap Dratini. However, to his shock, Ash simply calls Dratini's name and the little dragon pops out of the water behind her opponent. With the Executor's back to her, she barrels into it with the combo move of Extreme Speed and Dragon Rush, which Ash has recently decided to name Dragon Missile. The attack hits dead on, and the force of the attack, combined with Executor being caught so off guard, is enough to send the large Pokemon tumbling into the pool. There's a great splash, and when the water settles, Executor is floating on the surface of the pool, its eyes swirling with a knockout. Seeing this, Ash raises an eyebrow at Mandy. Matter-of-factly, he comments that after the way he'd been acting earlier at the cafe, he thought that his Pokemon would have been able to take at least one hit from Dratini. Did he switch to his B team, or was everything he said before just as much smoke and mirrors as his magic? Mandy glares at Ash, telling him not to get cocky. He just got a lucky hit. That won't happen a second time. Ash lifts his chin and narrows his eyes at him in a clear challenge, telling him to prove it then. Glaring, Mandy tells him be careful what you wish for as he calls out his next Pokemon, Seadra. The moment it's out of its Pokeball, Mandy tells it to use agility to race around the arena and prevent Dratini from landing any hits. Ash simply leans against the railing of his platform and rests his chin on his hand. Then, with the same borderline bored tone, he tells Dratini to use Thunderbolt on the water. Dratini launches a bolt of electricity at the water before Mandy or Seadra can even react. And, just like that, the Magician's second Pokemon is down. Refusing to admit defeat, Mandy sends out his final Pokemon, Golbat. Hoping to regain the upper hand, he commands the bat to use Poison Fang on Dratini, hoping that the still electrified water will trap the little dragon and guarantee him a hit, and hopefully a poison. However, before the attack can land, Ash tells her to jump to a different platform with extreme speed. The graceful water serpent does just that, easily clearing the water and landing safely on the platform, while Golbat slams face first into the platform she was previously on. Once she's there, Ash tells her to follow up with another Thunderbolt. Dratini launches the attack, hitting the Golbat square in the back as it's trying to right itself from the collision. And, just like that, Ash claims a 3-0 victory and thoroughly embarrasses the pompous Git. The ecstatic baby dragon rushes over to him and begins to nuzzle his cheek in joy, much to the Raven's amusement. A little later, Ash is walking toward the common area to look for Brock, Misty, Meowth, and Pikachu when he notices a reporter and a cameraman. It's a little strange that they'd be in the common area. He thought that they'd be in the waiting rooms looking for people to interview. He's about to start walking past them when he overhears what they're saying. Then he makes a swift about face and walks in the other direction, determined to go the long way around. When he finally manages to find his friends and family, it's time for Misty to go to her own battle, leaving them no time to talk over Ash's battle. Ash barely has enough time to wish Misty luck before she's heading out to her battle with Tyra. Stepping out onto the field, the two girls give each other a determined look before the Greenette grins and calls over to Misty that she was hoping that they'd see each other again. She's been itching for a rematch. Misty grins back, telling Tyra that she wasn't expecting to see her at the League of all places, but she'll gladly accept the chance to battle her. She wants to see how much stronger they've both gotten. When the referee calls the match to begin, both girls are quick on the draw, calling out their Pokemon at the same time. Misty calls out her oldest Pokemon, Starmie, while Tyra calls out a newer addition to her team, Mightyena. Misty is surprised by the appearance of a Hoenn Pokemon, and Tyra explains that she met the Bite Pokemon on Route 1. Apparently, a young trainer released his Poochyena, and their numbers have been growing in that area since. Lucky for her, because now she's got the perfect counter to not just her Starmie, but the little Psyduck that beat her last time. With that, Tyra makes her first move. Intent on capitalizing on Starmie's weakness to dark types and the disadvantage that the water type has on the current field, she calls for Mightyena to use Bite. Not wanting to give Tyra any advantage, Misty calls for Starmie to dodge. Starmie does just that, narrowly avoiding Mightyena's jaws. Knowing that Starmie's best attack, Psychic, is useless here, she calls for them to use one of their backup moves, Thunderbolt. Hopefully, they'll get lucky and Mightyena will be paralyzed. Unfortunately, the attack doesn't even connect, with Mightyena ducking behind one of the field's many boulders for cover. Capitalizing on Misty and Starmie's loss of focus, Tyra calls for Mightyena to attack again with Bite. This time, the attack connects, causing Starmie's attack to cut off as it flinches. Refusing to give up, Misty tells Starmie to use Rapid Spin to get out of the dog's jaws. Starmie begins to spin, whacking Mightyena in the face and forcing it to loosen its hold, allowing Starmie to escape. Taking advantage of their close proximity and also hoping to get some distance, Misty calls for Starmie to hit Mightyena with a point-blank Hydro Pump. Starmie unleashes the attack, dealing a direct hit while also pushing itself away from the water pressure. Once it's gotten some distance, it stops its attack, spinning in order to stand back up. Tyra calls out to her soaked and tired Mightyena, asking if it's alright. The large dog Pokemon shakes itself, spraying some of the water in its coat around before giving its trainer a determined bark. Grinning, she tells her loyal puppa that she doubts that they'll let them get within biting range now. She tells it to use Snarl. Baring its teeth, Mightyena lets out a series of harsh barks, causing a shockwave of dark energy. Recognizing that Starmie won't be able to take a hit like that, Misty calls for it to use Lightning Bolt, hoping to knock the Mightyena out and interrupt the attack. Unfortunately, they're just a second too slow, and both attacks hit their targets at the exact same time. The two Pokemon fall to the ground, Starmie knocked out by the dual super effective attacks, while Mightyena is toppled by the combined damage of a Hydro Pump and a Thunderbolt that's been supercharged by its waterlogged fur. Both girls call their Pokemon back before calling out their next Pokemon, Cloyster for Tyra and Lantern for Misty. This time, it's Tyra that makes the first move, calling for her Cloyster to hit Lantern with Rock Blast. Reacting fast, Misty calls for Lantern to evade with Aqua Jet. In an instant, water surrounds the fish, allowing it to launch itself away from the attack and over the ice water type. Once it's on the other side, it spins around, the water dissipating as it slides backwards from the inertia. While it's still sliding, Misty calls for Lantern to launch a Thunderbolt while Cloyster has its back to it. However, Tyra has her own means of defense, telling Cloyster to use Protect. The green shield comes up just in time to negate Lantern's attack. Not giving up, however, Misty tells Lantern to use Aqua Jet to get in close, then follow her up with Wild Charge. Lantern does just that, launching itself at Cloyster before dropping the Aqua Jet to surround itself with the electricity. However, before Lantern can hit its target, Cloyster shifts out of the way. With the inertia from the Aqua Jet, Lantern is unable to turn and instead goes sailing past Cloyster and into one of the rocks littering the field. Misty calls out to Lantern, asking if it's okay. Lantern gets up, shaking itself before nodding to Misty, who calls out for another Thunderbolt. However, just like last time, Cloyster uses Protect, rendering the attack useless. Misty grits her teeth. Tyra must know that one of those bolts is an instant loss, so she's saving Cloyster's Protects for them. Switching up her strategy, she tells Lantern to use Blizzard. Tyra snorts at this, not even telling Cloyster to dodge while thinking that Misty is getting desperate. After all, Cloyster is an ice type, this won't do anything. However, while the blanket of snow is flying, Misty calls for Lantern to use Aqua Jet to get into position before using Wild Charge. Tyra's eyes widen as she realizes what Misty is doing. She's using Blizzard as a cover so they can't see where Lantern is coming from. Before she can tell Cloyster to get out of the blizzard, Lantern slams into it, sending it flying across the field where it lands with a squelch. The dirt of the field having been turned into mud from all the water attacks. Wanting to regain her momentum, Tyra calls for Cloyster to use Rock Blast again. This time, it hits, causing Lantern to cry out in pain as it's sent toppling into the mud. Misty asks if her friend is alright, and it shakily gets up, still determined to continue. Both determined to end this round in their favour, Misty calls for Lantern to use Wild Charge again, while Tyra calls for Cloyster to use Giga Impact. The two Pokemon collide before rebounding off of one another and going skidding across the muddy field. While Cloyster gets up, battered but still ready to continue, Lantern lays in the mud, eyes spiraling. Misty calls back her Lantern before pulling out her last Pokemon, Psyduck. Tyra grins, seeing the Pokemon that she most wants to battle, before telling Cloyster to use Rock Blast. As Cloyster launches the attack, Misty calls for Psyduck to dodge before countering with Psybeam. Psyduck does just that, jumping out of the way of the rocks and launching its attack in one smooth motion. Tyra calls for Cloyster to dodge, and the large clam Pokemon tries, only to find that it can't move. To Tyra's horror, Cloyster's weight has caused it to sink into the mud that has become the field and is now stuck. Psyduck's attack hits dead on, finishing what Lantern started and knocking Cloyster out. Tyra recalls her oldest Pokemon, thanking it for all of its hard work before grabbing her final Pokeball. With a fire in her eyes, she calls out her trump card, Vileplume. Now in the final stretch and determined to make use of Vileplume's advantage against Psyduck, Tyra calls for the flower Pokemon to set up Sunny Day before using Growth. While Vileplume moves to follow its trainer's instructions, Misty calls for Psyduck to take advantage of Vileplume's second typing, calling for Psyduck to hit it with a Psybeam. The attack hits, but Vileplume pulls a purple berry out from between its petals and takes a bite before it does. When the Psybeam connects, Vileplume barely flinches. Tyra asks Misty if she thought they hadn't accounted for Vileplume's second typing. Taking advantage of this chance, she calls for Vileplume to use Growth again. Not willing to give up, Misty calls for Psyduck to use Psybeam again. The attack hits, this time causing Vileplume to wince in pain, but not before it's able to get off a third Growth. With Vileplume's special offense boosted, Tyra calls for a Solar Beam. Panicked, Misty calls for Psyduck to dodge, but as it tries to move, it slips on the mud and bangs its head. Psyduck clutches its head as it begins to pound from its ever-present headache intensifying. Before it can recover, Vileplume launches its Solar Beam, hitting Psyduck point blank. Psyduck whimpers as the pain from the Solar Beam mixes with the pain from its headache, making its ears ring. For a moment, it wishes that it'll just be knocked out so it won't have to deal with this anymore. But then, through the pain and the ringing, it hears a familiar voice calling out to it, asking it to hold on. That voice, it's Misty's. Memories of Psyduck's time with Misty and their friends flash through Psyduck's mind. Memories of Misty's gentle affection and dedication. No, it can't fall here. If it falls here, Misty's run in the league ends here. It fights against the pain in its head, willing it to subside so that it can continue the battle. So that it can claim victory for the trainer that saw value in it when everyone else cast it aside. The pain rises higher and higher as Psyduck fights against it. Until... Misty calls out for Psyduck as she waits for the glow of the Solar Beam to fade, so she can see if her water duck is alright. Vileplume has finally ended its attack, so it should only be a few seconds. However, rather than the light fading, it gets brighter, filling the field with light until it suddenly bursts, and standing in the center of where the light had come from is a Golduck. Misty blinks hard to keep herself from crying in joy and relief at seeing her Pokemon alright and evolved. Turning back to the battle, she refuses to let Golduck's efforts be for nothing. Deciding to make use of a move that Psyduck had learnt only recently, she calls for it to use Haze. Knowing that this move is unavoidable, Tyra tells Vileplume to use Solar Beam again before it loses its power boost. However, to Tyra and Vileplume's shock and horror, the attack doesn't charge anywhere near as fast, which means that Sunny Day must have worn off already. Taking advantage of this opening, Misty calls for Golduck to end the battle with Psybeam. The gem on Psyduck's head glows as it launches its attack at Vileplume. However, this isn't the Psybeam that was expected. It is something much stronger. This is Psychic. The attack hits, sending Vileplume flying back, creating a large mud splash when it lands. When the mud levels out, it is revealed that Vileplume has been completely knocked out. Misty jumps for joy as the referee announces her victory, running out onto the field to hug her Golduck. Tyra smiles a sad smile as she returns her Vileplume before walking over to Misty. Holding out her hand, she thanks the redhead for an amazing battle. Misty accepts the hand happily, thanking Tyra in return. And that, everyone, is where I'm going to leave the story for now. Join me next time as our heroes continue to make their way through the league. I'm Rune. See you next chapter.